Toronto's transit system under the spotlight for all the wrong reasons.
You literally could not move at all.
I don't think I'm going to come down on New Year's next year.
From dangerous overcrowding to fire concerns, serious questions reignited around safety on the TTC.
The OPP charged about 20 people every single day of impaired driving.
Plus, road safety always top of mind around the holidays. Police across the GTA released staggering drinking and driving stats.
It was just a pit of hell.
And digging out of disaster, Yonge and Eglinton businesses finally hope to revive following a decade-long closure for crosstown construction. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover. Toronto is starting this new year with a conversation that dominated the headlines last year, safety on the TTC. In a moment, we'll update you on the overcrowding situation at Union from this past holiday weekend. But first, to a review that's now underway of whether to allow e-bikes on transit going forward. It comes after one caught fire on a subway car on New Year's Eve, causing a massive blaze. Greg Ross explains what officials are grappling with.
This cell phone video of a fully engulfed subway car at the Yonge Sheppard subway station was captured on New Year's Eve. The cause of the fire, an electric bike.
The fire resulted from the failure of a lithium-ion battery pack that provided the power source to an e-bike. The battery failed and went into what is known as thermal runaway, and shortly thereafter ignited, resulting in an intense and aggressive fire.
911. Fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt in the fire. The person who brought the bike onto the subway was treated at the scene for minor injuries. The fire chief says they are responding to more and more fires involving lithium-ion batteries.
In 2022, there were 29 fires in Toronto that resulted from the failure of a lithium-ion battery. In 2023, the number of lithium-ion battery fires in Toronto increased to 55. The majority of these fires involve micro-mobility devices such as scooters and e-bikes.
A spokesperson for the TTC told CBC News that e-bikes and scooters are currently permitted on subways.
Everybody get out! Get out! Get out!
It scared me a lot because I'm also driving with e-bike.
This food delivery driver says he often takes his e-bike on the subway.
It's depend on weather. If it's so cold or if it's raining outside, so I can't go back home with my cycle. Or sometimes my battery is like fully down, so there is no charge.
Toronto Fire is now working closely with the TTC on reviewing policies surrounding the use of lithium-ion batteries.
Ultimately, we have to balance the important need for things like mobility-assisted devices on the TTC against and with the concerns and the necessary provisions for public fire safety.
I don't think the answer at this point is simply to call for a ban because there's no way to enforce it. If you see e-bikes now, they look pretty similar to just regular bikes. So there's no way to actually tell the difference in a lot of these instances.
There are a number of factors that can lead to a lithium-ion battery catching fire.
Some type of physical damage to the battery. Using an unapproved or uncertified battery that is not designed for the specific application, or using a battery that is not UL or ULC approved for the specific application, tampering with or modifying the battery and/or the battery charger.
Chief Matthew Pegg says Toronto Fire is working closely with city staff in developing a comprehensive lithium-ion battery safety campaign that will include important information about the use of these batteries. That campaign is scheduled to launch later this year. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, the TTC says it'll be meeting with the city and Metrolinx this week to review crowding issues at Union Station on New Year's Eve. Videos posted on social media show massive crowds standing shoulder to shoulder with little room to move.
It was actually very scary. People screaming, people pushing, people asking to not push because they couldn't breathe.
Both the TTC and GO Transit were free to ride on New Year's Eve. The TTC says shortly before 12:30 a.m., A train had to be taken out of service after a fight broke out, and riders had to be offloaded onto an already busy platform. The Transit Commission says it had a plan for crowds on New Year's Eve, increasing staffing levels by 5 or 6 times, but the number of people surpassed expectations, so now it's all under review. And a scary scene on the highway to tell you about. Police say a Mississauga transit bus crossed over into oncoming traffic, striking another vehicle before ending up in a ditch, sending passengers and the bus driver to hospital.
There were several people that were injured, most seriously the driver of the Mississauga transit bus. That driver was transported to an area trauma center.
It happened around 11 this morning near Highway 27 and Dixon Road. 14 passengers were on the bus. 10 of them were taken to hospital, along with the driver of the other vehicle. They all have non-life-threatening injuries. Anybody with information or dash cam footage is asked to contact investigators. The OPP is announcing today that despite decades of warnings against drinking and driving, the problem continues to get worse. The Provincial Police Service just released last year's stats on impaired driving charges. Anam Khan takes a closer look.
Over 900 drivers charged and nearly 1,500 charges laid in Ontario for impaired driving just in the last month and a half during the festive ride campaign. A police effort to crack down on impaired driving across the province during the holidays. And police say the numbers have been increasing in the last few years.
I can tell you that the OPP charged about 20 people every single day of impaired driving.
The OPP says between Christmas Day and New Year's Eve, officers laid nearly 200 impaired driving charges across the province, a nearly 20% increase over the same week last year. Durham Police also announcing today they charged more people last year, but its officers also saying they stopped far more people. Durham's ride campaign stopped nearly 12,700 cars and charged 87 people with impaired driving. Last year, it stopped almost 10,000 people and charged 77. They also highlighted the carelessness of drivers. In a statement, Durham Police said some people seem oblivious to the dangers of impaired driving. One driver even had an unsecured toddler in the car while operating impaired by drugs. Sergeant Carrie Schmidt says throughout 2023, police laid over 11,000 impaired driving charges, a 7% increase from 2022. And young men still make up the vast majority of those charged.
50 people so far in our records have been killed just this year alone in alcohol or drug-related crashes investigated by the OPP.
The advocacy group Mothers Against Drunk Driving deals with the tragedy families face after crashes related to impaired driving.
It's disappointing. We're in 2023. We know what the dangers of impaired driving are. We all know it.
Matt says despite widespread education programs about drinking and driving, police enforcement is still key.
One of the things that deters people the most from driving impaired is their perception of getting caught.
But the numbers the police released today prove people do get caught each and every day. Anam Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
A bit of good news to tell you about tonight with the Eglinton Crosstown LRT construction. Metrolink says it's completed some major work at the intersection of Yonge and Eglinton, allowing for traffic there to get moving again after a decade of construction headaches. Nearby businesses say it's an update they have been waiting for years. Patrick Swadden shows us what's changed.
Yonge and Eglinton, the intersection of never-ending construction. As the Eglinton LRT is built underneath, the project hasn't exactly made friends with local businesses.
It was just a pit of hell. It was like they were digging for oil, basically, for years.
But now, a glimmer of encouragement. Looking around this intersection a couple days into the new year, all 4 crosswalks are open. Traffic is flowing a little more smoothly, and that's given people who live and work in the area a little hope. After years of construction and congestion, Metrolinx tells CBC News they've completed some major work at the intersection above what they say is the largest and most complex station on the LRT line. That's helping loosen up the eternal clog. It's got some locals jazzed.
It's much better.
I have a lot of friends who live here, so even walking to their houses has been a lot easier.
This man takes the bus to his job at Young Eglinton Center.
Up until about a week ago, if I were taking the bus this way, I would get off 1 or 2 stops that way, just because it's quicker to walk to the subway from over there than stay on the bus.
He says it was especially bad for people with mobility issues, something the mall routinely received complaints for. But now,
it looks like a functioning intersection. You can cross every way, every single time. Cars and buses go like they should. It was, for a long time, it was so bad. It was so bad.
But not everybody is rejoicing just yet. A little over to the east, some businesses still sit behind a maze of construction.
We haven't had any access for the patrons to come in because it's like a labyrinth to get here.
Martinez says it's much harder for foot traffic to pass by, and that's reduced business substantially.
The water was shut off constantly, so it's been pretty hard, running the business.
Metrolinx said in a statement to CBC Toronto, remaining work will be completed in early 2024, with hydro crews continuing to work in certain isolated locations to complete minor utility connections. But one thing they can't provide, an opening date for the LRT.
I've sort of made up my mind I won't retire until it's opened up.
Patrick Swadden, CBC News, Toronto.
Time now for a first check on weather, and it is -1 and cloudy in Toronto right now. Nick Cernkovich is tracking weather for us. Hey there, Nick. With some gusty wind this evening, it is feeling more like -6, hey?
Well, Chris, a bit of a reality check in terms of our temperatures. Just a week ago, we were looking at rainfall, high single-digit temperatures. A little different today as temps just tipped the 0 mark at 1 degree, and they've fallen since. There's a look at daytime highs through the day today, and it has come with some cloud cover. The cloud cover continues through tonight. Actually, there's quite a large area of cloud with the system that's sort of pushing across. We'll see cold air being dragged in with this as well, and a few flurries until Thursday, where things start to clear out, but the temperatures begin to drop. Here is a look at the next 24, -1 through the overnight period tonight. The risk of a few flurries, not much though, nothing accumulating. 2 degrees for tomorrow with cloud cover, but the temperatures drop. We'll tell you how cold it's going to get this week coming up in just a bit. Chris.
All right, people will want those details. Thank you, Nick. And you might be seeing more cannabis stores across the GTA with changes to how weed is sold in Ontario this new year. Licensed cannabis retailers are now allowed to have 150 stores province-wide, doubling the previous limit of 75. Retailers are applauding the move, saying it'll help crack down on the illicit cannabis market.
So, look, is this going to get it down to 0? No. But it's just another tool in our toolbox to be able to keep driving down those illegal sales.
So the province says the increase is intended to help further support a healthy and competitive legal cannabis market in Ontario. As of June 2023, there were about 1,500 cannabis stores operating in the province, which is the most in the country. A lot of us are hoping for a fresh start in 2024, and many political observers would argue that is true for the Premier as well. Last year, his government dealt with controversies on multiple fronts, most notably the Greenbelt land swap deal that cost him 2 cabinet ministers and several political staffers. CBC's senior reporter at Queen's Park, Mike Crawley, looks at what to expect in Ontario politics this year.
A parking lot in Niagara Falls, the site of Doug Ford's biggest political climb down since becoming Premier.
I made a promise to you that I wouldn't touch the Greenbelt. I broke that promise. And for that, I'm very, very sorry.
Despite that apology, the Greenbelt affair could still haunt Ford politically in the new year, because the RCMP is investigating whether anyone should face criminal charges.
The Greenbelt in particular has been the most damaging piece for him because it plays into something that we know is a weakness in how people perceive him. There is a certain segment of voters that is growing that thinks that Ford makes decisions not in the best interest of regular people, but for himself and for his close buddies.
2 years into the government's 10-year plan for 1.5 million homes, the pace of housing construction in Ontario is nowhere near on track to hit that target.
There are reasons for that aren't in the government's control. There's a labor shortage, interest rates make it more difficult to finance construction. All those things are true. but they have to show progress on housing, especially now that the federal government is finally showing progress on housing.
The new year brings a new leader to the Ontario Liberal Party in the form of Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie.
This is going to completely change the dynamics of Ontario politics in 2024, because up until this point, the Liberals have not had a leader, a permanent leader that can go up against Doug Ford.
Bonnie Crombie? Oh, the new Ontario Liberal leader.
The PCs are already trying to define Crombie in the minds of voters with attack ads like this.
She even increased taxes as mayor in this economy?
You don't spend that much money on opposition messaging unless you do see somebody as a threat.
Marit Stiles is still new-ish as leader of the NDP.
Wow, thank you.
Her big political challenge in 2024 will be competing with both Ford and Crombie.
I think you're going to see Marit Stiles and the NDP really spending the next year trying to position themselves as the party of healthcare.
For the government, one key task will be finding solutions to the healthcare staffing crunch. Also on its agenda, whether to boost funding to universities and colleges and allow tuition hikes, both recommended by an expert panel. And how to address people's affordability concerns in the next budget, which must be tabled by the end of March. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
The new year is kicking off with a milestone week for women's hockey in this country. Tonight, the puck dropped in Game 2 of the Professional Women's Hockey League. Montreal and Ottawa heating up the ice tonight. But last night, the official league kickoff was right here in Toronto. Tennis and sports equality icon Billie Jean King dropping the ceremonial opening puck for yesterday's game. It was played in front of a sold-out crowd at the old Maple Leaf Gardens, now known as the Mattamy Athletic Centre. Unfortunately, Toronto lost 4-0 against New York, but it was a special moment for hockey fans, and nobody knows that better than my next guest, Michelle Boyce. Michelle and her wife were there in the stands for the inaugural game. Hey there, Michelle. Has the excitement of yesterday's kickoff worn off yet?
Absolutely not. It was absolutely exhilarating.
I bet it was exhilarating. Take me back to the arena last night. What was the atmosphere like as you were entering?
Everybody was, I've been to a lot of hockey games, and everybody had the exact same smile on their face. They were all excited. They all had this feeling of hope and exhilaration from finally having the opportunity to have a professional women's hockey league. And I cannot tell you how excited my wife and I were to have that opportunity. My daughter is pumped for it. She's an Ottawa fan. We're a Toronto fan. So there's some rivalry in the family, and it's amazing hockey.
Rivalry already. I love it. Okay, and so you and your wife went to the game together. What was it like to get to share that moment with her and the rest of the sold-out crowd?
It was absolutely amazing. The crowd was into it and noisy and cheering and doing all the things that you want a Toronto crowd to do to cheer on their team, and the little behind the glass, and I mean Sarah Nurse throwing pucks to the girls in the audience, and the looks on their faces when they got those pucks, and it was just I can't even find the words to describe how amazing it was to see all of the women on the ice and doing what they love to do.
And did you ever expect that we would be here in this moment where there was a pro women's league for hockey?
My wife and I have had this argument for the last 15 years where I kept on arguing that we were going to have this moment, and she's like, not in our lifetime, and it was, I am so happy that we're finally there and that we've gotten this moment. When the last league collapsed, we're like, oh no. And then this one came to fruition, and it was absolutely amazing to see all the backers, the sponsors, the fans, the tickets sold out I mean, we wanted more tickets for the Toronto game. We were 200th in line at 10 a.m. and they were sold out in seconds. And that says that, you know, the world is ready to have professional women's hockey, and the time is now.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight. We appreciate your time, and I'm glad that you won that argument.
So are we.
Michelle Boyce went to last night's inaugural game for the Professional Women's Hockey League here in Toronto. Welcome back, and it's about to get a little chillier. Last word tonight, over to you, Nick, for a look at the long-range forecast.
All right, Chris, well, certainly cooling down today, and that trend continues coming up over the next couple of days. Let's take a look at our weather headlines. The temperatures drop. We've got some flurries to contend with, even a little bit of accumulating snow to the north this week. Sunny breaks, though, as we move toward the end of the week. Here's a look at the big picture. Large area of cloud moving across the region. This is a weak system. It is going to drag in some colder air, though, and we've got some flurries to the north of it. As we move through tonight, the chance, I mean, the very small chance of seeing a few isolated flurries, mostly though to the north of the GTA. Continues through tomorrow, generally just some cloud cover to the north. We've got some flurries there as well. A little bit heavier in terms of light snow or flurries through tomorrow night before we hit Thursday, where things begin to clear out. Now, in terms of how much we can expect with this, well, it's really not looking like much, certainly not for the GTA. North could see a few centimeters of snow with this coming off of the lake. Otherwise, areas around the Golden Horseshoe may be traced to a centimeter of snow. If anything, slicking up the roads. Most of the accumulation is going to be to the north. A little gusty there as we move through tonight and into tomorrow morning. The winds begin to ease off. Winds out of the southwest about 20 kilometers per hour, and that's the story as we head through Wednesday night as well. So that's going to drop the wind chills a little bit through the overnight to about -6. Temps in the city of Toronto, 0 outside, about -1 or so. There's a look at the overnight forecast, and again, wind chills closer to about -6 is what we're looking at. 2 degrees tomorrow, flurries again through tomorrow night. Notice the overnight lows, a little bit below 0 there. -4 for Thursday, where a cool down happens and then starts to warm up a little bit to around the seasonal mark as we head toward the weekend. Chris.
Looks like a good weekend, too. Thanks, Nick.